From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. This is Dateline Malacañang and here are the news. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. administered the oath of office to the new members of the Partido Federal ng Pilipinas or PFP in a ceremony at the Heroes Hall in Malacañang Palace on Thursday, August 24, 2023. The PFP was formally accredited by the Commission on Elections or COMELEC in October of the year 2018. It is also noted that President Marcos Jr. stood as the party standard bearer during the 2022 national elections. Here is Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Good morning to everyone and all the, especially of course the new members of our party, the Partido Federal ng Pilipinas. The headed, of course, who has been helmed really since the beginning of the campaign by Governor Jun Tamayo. But of course, the origin of this goes back to my first run as Vice President with General Tom Lanchon, that siyang nauna that proposed this. And the reason that we have done this is that, of course, our party, our group, we have turned what was a minor party in the political spectrum into the majority party now in the country. And that is because not only for political convenience, not only to prepare for elections, but because I have always been of the belief that a party must stand for an ideology. Pagka yung partido ay walang ideology, ay hindi talaga lalago. Palipat-lipat ang membro, kuminsan matibay, kuminsan mahina. At yun ang mga nangyayari kuminsan dito sa Pilipinas dahil kung ano-anong partidong ginagamit. Lalong-lalo na pag nadating na sa local government ay paiba-iba na. Kaya kailangan there has to be a central tenet, a central principle to what we are doing. And that is, we were talking here about the federalism. And what we have started to do, kahit na in all but name, ay ating ginagawa, ay talagang ibinibigay ang discretion, ang power, ang function, hanggat maaari sa pinakamababa na level na maaari natin gawin. So, we are doing the first step of the federal government for the Philippines in all but name. And that is what we will continue to do. And that is very simple, that derives from a very simple idea, that the stability of a political structure is much more dependent, much more reliable when we have many power centers. If the power centers only belong here in Manila, then papagsakin mo yung Manila, bagsak ang buong Pilipinas. But with the power centers being given to us, to the local governments, to the local districts, and to those who are operating at the local level, and thereby bringing those power centers to many, many, many places, it makes for a more stable political structure and makes a more stable political life. Dahil kahit kung may mangyari sa isang lugar, kahit bumagsak yan, basta't nasira, hindi na talaga pwede, nagkagera, whatever, tuloy pa rin yung mga iba. Hindi nasisira ang buong sistema. And that is the central ideology of the PFP. Now, certainly, PFP is a political party. And therefore, that is why we are preparing for all the political cycles that are coming very soon. Ang una dyan, as we all know, tayo naman lahat ay dumaan dyan, as we all know, the barangay elections have a big impact, have a big effect on how the 2025 elections will turn out. Kung ano yung mga resulta dyan. Kasi kung tayo magiging kandidato, mananalo tayo sa 2025, kailangan natin ang suporta ng barangay level. So that is why it was incumbent upon us to now immediately try and organize ourselves so that we are prepared. Because there is always a synergy. Kung meron tayong mga kasama na kailangan ng tulong galing sa partido, kung may matibay ng partido na talagang nagtatrabaho, na talagang may ginagawa, ay makakatulong yan doon sa ating kandidato. At yun ang ating mga yun ang mga ating pag-iisip. Kaya tayo na dito ngayon. And that's why we are here today. So we are trying to align the forces that we are trying to align the political forces that are like-minded political forces. And to that end, I think it is opportune time to be able to say that after this, we are going to continue to talk to other political parties and come to an agreement with them para nga patibayin natin ang husto yung ating grupo. Kahit na nag-iiba ang ating mga partido, kahit na nag-iiba ang ating tinakbuhan, ay pwede pa rin magtulungan. So, I'm sure, alam naman natin, may mga conflict dyan kung minsan. Kasi kung mag-collision tayo sa isang partido, baka may kandidato sila, may kandidato din tayo. Well, that's the sort of thing that we will have to work out. Kaya kailangan na natin umpisahan na ngayon. And that's why we are doing this. And si Gov. June Tamayo has been working hard on keeping the party very well organized, and his priorities, the priorities that the party has chosen to focus upon in the last year, has been more about governance than politics. Dahil bago tayong pasok, marami tayong kailangan gawin, marami tayong kailangan palitan, marami tayong kailangan pag-isipan. So that is what we have really been trying to do. We are attempting to transform the government, to transform the bureaucracy, to transform even the thinking of ordinary Filipino citizens and our politicians. Paibayin natin ang pag-iisip para naman makaramdam naman yung ating mga kababayan ng pagbabago na talagang ang pamahalaan ay nandiyan para tulungan sila at hindi upang maging warlord, upang magkaroon ng private army, hindi yan ang ating hindi yan ang ating habol. Ang habol talaga natin ay gawin nating maganda ang sistema. And that's why the idea of federalism became very important. Because again, it is my firm belief that we really have to give ang aking laging sinasabi, which is very, very much in parallel with the thinking of federalism, is that with all the systems that we are trying to put together, what we are trying to do is to make the decision process be made in as low a level as possible. Dahil pagka nangangailangan tayo ng desisyon, dahan-dahan pa, akitin mo na yan hanggang para pabutin pa sa presidente, pabutin pa sa cabinet. Kung kaya na ng governor, kung kaya na ng congressman, sila na mag-decide. Sila naman nakakaalam. And I suppose that comes from my experience in local government and also in the legislature. So that I think is that unang-una mas mabilis ang proseso. Kasi mag-aantay, taas 6 na buwan yan bago bumalik. Pagbalik, iba na itsura kaysa yung pinadala ninyo. Alam natin lahat yun. So that's why that is what we are trying to do. That's why we still hold dear to everything that we do. The central principle that we give the functions and the powers we allow functions and powers to be exercised at the lowest possible level. Siyempre, pag national, kailangan dito sa central office, dito sa palasyo, sa mga cabinet, tayo mag-decide. Pero pagka naman, maari na sa regional level, maari ng pag-usapan ng mga governor, ng mga congressman, kayo bahala. Yun ang ating central principle. Kaya yun ang ating sinusundan. So, anyway, I'd like to welcome everyone. I just wanted to say that this is hindi kasi ako sang-ayon dun sa mga marriage of convenience sa political party na nangyayari sa atin. Kaya't nagpapaliwanag ako, hindi ito partido para lang dahil wala ka mapuntahan na partido. Dahil meron tayong paniniwala. Meron tayong hinahabol, meron tayong hangarin para sa ating bansa na pagandahin ang patakbo ng pamahalaan. At sa ganung paraan ay mabigyan natin siyempre ng tulong. At lalo na ngayon na nagkakagulo, kailangan natin pag-isipan ang mga strategies. Pag tinitignan natin, halimbawa ngayon, tinitignan natin yung presyo ng bigas. Lahat ng lugar ay ibang sitwasyon. So again, sinong nagsasabi sa atin what that situation is? Mga lokal. Hindi lamang mga politiko, kundi pati yung mga ating mga government workers, yung ating mga scientists na kung ano-ano na nag-aaral ng kung ano-ano na kailangan natin kung paano kailangan natin gawin. So I take the time to go through that so that we understand that this party stands for something. And we will continue to stand for that. And now that you have joined the party, we welcome you because we have now a bigger group who is continuing to work for the advocacy of improving the government bureaucracy, of improving the power situation in the Philippines, in the sense that we are trying to make our political system as stable as possible. Mga political theorists yan silang nagsasabi na talagang kailangan ikalat ang kapangyarihan. Huwag natin ilagay sa isang lugar. So that is what we are trying to do, and I'm very happy that we are at the beginnings of this organization of our party, that we are at the beginnings of our dealings, not only with our own party, but also with the other political players who are on the scene. Kaya patitibayan natin ng husto dahil mayroon talaga tayong ipinaglalaban. Kailangan natin ng maraming kakampi, kailangan natin ng lahat ng tulong. At dyan nabuhay yung aming tinatawag na whole of government at whole of nation approach. Dahil nga, kailangan talaga lahat ay magkaisa. Kaya't lagi kong pinapaalala sa tao, yung pagkakaisa na ating sinigaw ng kampanya, hindi po yan slogan, katotohanan yan. Yun talaga ang magiging solution sa ating mga problema. All right, so again, welcome to the party, welcome to the palace. I'm very happy to have had this opportunity to swear you all in. Meron pa yatang susunod na mga iba para makita na natin kung saan tayo. Soon we will hold, once we are completely organized, we will hold a caucus amongst all the party members. And tignan natin kung ano yung mga kailangan na ating mga individual members, what the party needs to do. We are practical politicians after all. Kailangan natin tignan kung ano yung political na situation para naman meron tayong sagot sa mga problema na haharapin natin. So thank you all very much, and I'm happy that you were able to come and take the oath personally here in the palace, and welcome to the PFP. Maraming salamat.
And you just heard Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. paid his last respects to Department of Migrant Workers Secretary Susan Tuts Ople, who passed away on Tuesday afternoon. Marcos, accompanied by his wife, First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos, arrived at the Heritage Memorial Park in Taguig City at around 7:29 in the evening on Wednesday to condole with the Ople family. Former President and now Pampanga Representative Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin, Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla, Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco, Senator Cynthia Villar, and former Senator Manuel Villar also went to the wake of Ople. Marcos had a brief talk with Administrator Arnel Ignacio of the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration before leaving the Memorial Park at around 8:05 in the evening. In a media interview in Santa Rosa City, Laguna, Marcos said Ople's death is a great loss to the Philippines. It is noted that Ople underwent surgery for stage 2 breast cancer in February 2020, but the cause of her death was not immediately revealed. Ople was appointed as DMW Secretary in June 2022. She also headed the Blas F. Ople Policy Center and Training Institute, a non-profit organization that is actively involved in labor and migration issues. The DMW said the Ople family would appreciate sending donations to the Blas F. Ople Policy Center instead of giving flowers.
Dateline Malacañang.
In related news, the Philippine Department of National Defense or DND expressed its condolences to the family and friends of DMW or Department of Migrant Workers Secretary Susan Tuts Ople, who died on Tuesday. Defense Secretary Gilberto C. Chodoro Jr. called Ople's appointment as the very first secretary of the DMW a huge blessing to the nation. Chodoro added that the entire country witnessed how the DMW chief used her energy and intellect to tirelessly protect and advance the interests of overseas Filipino workers. It is noted that the late DMW chief's father, Blas Fajardo Ople Sr., was the secretary of the Department of Labor and Employment, while Gilberto Chodoro Sr. was the administrator of the Social Security System during the administration of then-President Ferdinand E. Marcos Sr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, it is noted that the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs or DFA on Wednesday reiterated that Ayungin Shoal is within the Philippines' maritime zones and that Filipino activities in the area are not subjected to any state's approval. The statement came after Chinese Ambassador Wang Xilian on Tuesday made a comment that there had been a special arrangement for the delivery of humanitarian supplies to BRP Sierra Madre and that the problem arose when the Philippines transported large-scale building materials. DFA spokesperson Maria Teresita Daza did not confirm Wang's claims but said the rotation and resupply missions to the BRP Sierra Madre are legitimate and routine activities in our Exclusive Economic Zone or EEZ. The Philippine Coast Guard or PCG on Wednesday meanwhile denied that there was a special arrangement over what kind of supplies the country can bring to Ayungin Shoal. PCG spokesperson for West Philippine Sea J. Tariela stated that Manila does not need permission from Beijing as the country has sovereign rights over the feature. It is noted that the rotation and resupply or RORE mission was able to safely deliver fresh provision supplies to the contingent manning the beached BRP Sierra Madre at Ayungin Shoal on August 22. The National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea said the routine missions to the Philippine outpost on various features in the West Philippine Sea will continue on a regular basis.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news stories, the National Economic and Development Authority or NEDA board on Wednesday approved the inclusion of 3 more projects in the list of the government's priority infrastructure projects. In a televised briefing at Malacañang Palace in Manila, NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan said additional projects included in the infrastructure flagship projects or IFP list include the Tarlac-Pangasinan-La Union Expressway or TPLEX Extension Project, the Philippine Rural Development Project Scale Up, and the upgrade, expansion, operation, and maintenance of the Laguindingan International Airport project in Misamis Oriental. Balisacan stated that the inclusion of these projects in the list is a significant contribution to the timely implementation of the projects and fully realizing their economic returns, and will also help the government avoid the possibility of increasing cost and financing charges due to delays. The projects were included in the IFP list following the NEDA board's approval of the revised guidelines for the formulation, prioritization, and monitoring of the government's IFPs. Balisacan then mentioned that the total cost of the 197 IFPs now amounts to 8.71 trillion pesos. Citing a report by the NEDA Board Committee on Infrastructure, Balisacan said that as of July 23, a total of 71 projects worth 4.11 trillion pesos are now ongoing, up from 68 projects reported in the first quarter. Additional projects that have advanced to the ongoing phase are the Metro Cebu Expressway, the Nautical Highway Network Improvement, and the Daang Maharlika Improvement projects. The Department of Public Works and Highways is implementing the connectivity and transportation infrastructure projects which aim to improve connectivity across the country. Meanwhile, Balisacan said the NEDA board also approved on Wednesday the request for change in cost, scope, and implementation timeline of the flood risk management project for Cagayan de Oro River. The project aims to reduce flooding in high-risk and flood-prone areas, develop Cagayan de Oro River, and strengthen the resilience of the communities along the river stretch to climate change and other related hazards. The board also approved the provision of 6 fire trucks for Marawi City through an Official Development Assistance or ODA grant from China worth 72.5 million pesos to support the Bangon Marawi Rehabilitation and Recovery Program.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Socio-Economic Planning Secretary said on Wednesday that the Marcos administration will focus on taming inflation and attracting more foreign investments to produce quality jobs for Filipinos aside from boosting government spending to attain its growth target this year. National Economic and Development Authority or NEDA Director General Arsenio Balisacan made the remarks when asked during a palace press briefing on the administration's thrust to achieve its gross domestic product or GDP target for 2023. The government reported that underspending resulted in slower growth and also announced fast-tracking state projects to boost spending. Balisacan said that there is progress in slowing down of inflation, adding that inflation has always been a major concern because when high inflation persists, that discourages or depresses domestic demand. He added that there is significant progress since January of this year in slowing down inflation and they would want to continue moving in that direction, saying that will be a big boost to the domestic demand and growth. Balisacan also mentioned that at the same time, the administration has been watching agencies and putting pressure on them to make sure that they are progressing, particularly those that impact on ease of doing business. When asked about the downside risk of attaining that target, the NEDA chief pointed to inflation as a major risk, especially with oil prices picking up again, as well as rice prices which have been rising. The administration, he said, is positioning to ensure further slowdown in inflation amid these developments and also see to it that is in good command of its policy tools. Balisacan added that by addressing the issues that the government has identified, it could still achieve at least the lower end of the range of 6 to 7% growth. The country needs to grow 6.6% in the second half to achieve 6% growth for the full year. That's according to the NEDA chief.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, the government needs to assess the economic impact of the proposed increase in minimum fare for jeepneys to ensure that it will not have grave repercussions for the country's growth momentum, according to Philippine Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan. Balisacan said in a palace briefing that before acting on the proposed fare adjustments, the government should take into consideration first its potential impact on the big part of the economy. When quizzed as to how the fare hike petition would affect the Philippine economy in general, the National Economic and Development Authority or NEDA chief said he has yet to study the proposal for him to provide more accurate findings. Balisacan mentioned that he would review the transport group's petition for the 5 peso fare hike for the first 4 kilometers and an additional 1 peso for the succeeding kilometer. He added that the decision on the proposed increase in minimum fare for jeepneys would also depend on the evaluation of the concerned agencies. Earlier, the Liga ng Transportasyon at Operators sa Pilipinas, Stop and Go Transport Coalition Incorporated, and the Federation of Jeepney Operators and Drivers Association of the Philippines submitted a letter requesting the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board or LTFRB to raise fares by 2 pesos for all jeepneys nationwide. Transport groups Pasang Mazda, Alliance of Transport Operators and Drivers Association of the Philippines, and Alliance of Concerned Transport Organizations filed on Tuesday a petition before LTFRB to increase the minimum fare from 12 pesos to 17 pesos. They also called on the LTFRB to issue an order granting a provisional adjustment to the current minimum fare of 12 pesos to 13 pesos.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. wants a centralized national digital ID system that is available to all agencies, and he has been monitoring closely the completion of the project. National Economic and Development Authority or NEDA Director General Arsenio Balisacan said in a palace press briefing on Wednesday that the President has been monitoring closely the completion of this project. Balisacan added that the government has now agreed to the provision of the digital ID first before the distribution of physical IDs, and the Department of Information and Communications Technology or DICT is spearheading the effort. Initially, instead of shifting to digital ID, the chief said the government has left it as a second priority. Balisacan also reported that the government is more than halfway in the production of the physical IDs and wants to speed up the distribution of the same to provide everyone with the identification before the end of the year. The National ID project completion is important because it will reduce the transaction cost in government as well as in the private sector, according to the Philippine Socio-Economic Planning Secretary. It will also allow the government to save a lot of resources under its social protection programs, since many of the income transfers targeted for the poor do not end up with the intended beneficiaries because of the leakages. With the digital ID, however, the ayuda or transfer income support like the food stamp program of the Social Welfare Department will now be delivered through the digital card with the use of the digital IDs.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news stories, the Philippine Bureau of Immigration or BI has intercepted 4 Filipino workers lured into a cryptocurrency scam recruitment abroad. In a statement on Wednesday, BI Commissioner Norman Tansinko said the Cambodia-bound victims were former employees in a work-from-home setting. They, however, were prohibited from departing last August 18 at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport Terminal 1 due to inconsistencies in their statements. Tansinko stated this type of illegal recruitment is not only isolated for Filipino victims but also reported to be recurring in other parts of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The BI said the victims misrepresented themselves with fake local gov or will fake or with fake local jobs before interception. Immigration officers found they were on a work-from-home setup under a casino company before being offered over 51,000 pesos worth of monthly salary abroad. Tansinko then reiterated his call to aspiring Filipino overseas workers to exercise vigilance, noting how previously repatriated victims experienced physical and psychological abuse by their illegal recruiters. The victims were transferred to the Interagency Council Against Trafficking to look at possible charges against their illegal recruiters.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, the victim of another shooting incident in Cotabato City on August 21 was not a member of the press but a Muslim scholar, as identified by the Presidential Task Force on Media Security or PTF-OMS. The clarification was made following initial reports saying that the victim, identified as Muhammad Hesam Midtimbang, was a radio block timer and host of the Bangsamoro Darul Ifta radio program aired over Gabay Radio 97.7 FM. Citing an updated local police report, PTF-OMS Executive Director Paul Gutierrez said Midtimbang was not a journalist but an ustads or someone who is knowledgeable on Islam laws. Gutierrez said the victim had been invited by Gabay Radio as guest on several occasions to seek his expertise, being an acknowledged scholar and expert on Islam. Midtimbang was gunned down by 2 unidentified assailants when he was about to board his vehicle parked along Governor Gutierrez Avenue at Barangay Rosary Heights 9 in Cotabato City past 6 in the evening on Monday. The victim sustained at least 5 gunshot wounds. Gutierrez said police are looking at politics and personal motive as likely reasons why Midtimbang was killed, given that the Muslim scholar came from a prominent political family in Cotabato City. It is noted that Gutierrez condemned on Monday the senseless act of violence and coordinated with the police and the military to expedite the resolution of the victim's case. During the BFT-OMS's first interagency meeting at Malacañang Palace in Manila on August 16, there was a discussion on the definition on who constitutes members of the media or those considered as media workers. Gutierrez said the clarification would help the task force in speeding up the resolution of all cases of violence against members of the media based on its mandate.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that concludes today's edition of Dateline Malacañang. Don't forget to follow the social media accounts of Radyo Pilipinas World Service for important news updates. This has been Steph Vicente. Good day and stay safe, everyone.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.